welcome to Sid Caudle, and welcome to a spectacular football result. And I got it entirely wrong, but I've been digging about what is really going on. And Sid, the win was phenomenal, but there's no way it should have been played in that stadium. It is political corruption that is Mexico and has been going on from the 1960s, when the stadium was built for the glory of Mexico and for big television companies. And believe it or not, that's why it was held there this very day in 2026.
Well, yes, I mean, obviously football is now, worth so much. I mean, the television rights are worth millions and millions, and FIFA will be making enormous amounts of money out of this World Cup. And I don't know exactly how much, but there's a lot of money that England will have made just by winning that last 16 match and getting into the quarterfinals. But yeah, they were expected to lose in Mexico, largely because it's played at over 7,000 feet. So the air is something which is very difficult to run in. You easily lose your breath, and the ball behaves differently. It actually travels a lot further because the air is so thin. So it's everything was geared up for in Mexico's favour for them to win that match. But as I said beforehand, I said there's a very good spirit in the England team, and they're very much playing for each other. And even though Tuchel has left players behind that we would have expected to have been in the team, like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Harry Maguire and one or two others, the fact is he's chosen players that have got a good spirit and will help the spirit of the team, and left behind players that he thought would possibly be a drag on the spirit of the team. So, that's what he's chosen, and the players that he's chosen are delivering for him.
The other fascinating thing in all this is, and it's again corruption, Sid, is a certain gentleman called Barragum, and he got a red card in the match between the USA and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And Mr. Trump apparently phoned up complaining of the decision because red card, you're not playing in the next match. And blow me down, FIFA back down again. And it's bizarre. And he got the decision suspended for 12 months because there is a strange law within the FIFA presidents that says you can do a thing like this. Sid, it's bizarre. FIFA have been corrupt since day one, and they go on being corrupt. But at least the president, can you see Keir Starmer doing that? No.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Trump has got guts, he's got boldness, and God bless him. I think that's funny, really. But Balogun was one of US's best players, so I'm sure Pochettino, who's manager of the US team, I'm sure he'll be absolutely thrilled. But I like the US team. I think they're a very good team, and I don't know who they're playing next, but I think they'll go a long way in this tournament. Well, they've already gone a long way. I think they'll continue. My prediction, by the way, they were talking about the host nation, Mexico, Canada, and the US. Which one will go the furthest? And I said the US will go the furthest. I think they've got the best team of those three. And it looks as though I'm going to be proved right on that as well, as I am on so many things to do with football.
Well, isn't there just? And there are lots of things to ponder there. But well done, GB. Well, no, it's not GB. It's England on its own.
Yes.
Sorry, Scotland. Sorry, Wales. UK can be rightly proud of their team. Right, having said that, Sid, there are lots of things going on at the moment politically. We've not left football completely yet, but let's go to the speech of our great leader before he left, and the speech indeed of Andy Burnham. Now, Starmer's speech, I'm sorry, some of the papers actually said it was deluded. I would agree with that. Was it?
Totally. I mean, he's talked about, I stabilized the country. I've stabilized the economy. I've got everything on us. We inherited total chaos. I mean, it's just nonsense. Utter, utter nonsense. I mean, he didn't inherit total chaos. And by the way, on the defense, he says that he's increasing defense. And he's putting an extra 15 billion into the defense system. But the fact is, and he inherited, defense cut to smithereens by the Tories. The fact is, he inherited defence spending at 2.3% of GDP, which is actually relatively high, and it's still 2.3% of GDP now. So after 2 years, he hasn't put any increase whatsoever in defence spending. It's all talking about what he might do in the future. So it's like, everything he says is dishonest. That's for stabilising the economy. Inherited inflation at 2%. It's now 2.8%. I mean, he talks about, oh, inflation was 11% under the Tories. Well, that's what it peaked at, but that's not what the inflation he inherited. He inherited inflation at 2%. Unemployment's gone up significantly under Labour. Debt is inherited. The deficit was 122 billion when he came to office. It's now 129 billion. So it's not gone up a lot, but tax has gone up. Tax has gone up by 70 billion. So what's he stabilised? I mean, growth is anemic. Growth is 1.1% per year. I mean, he likes to talk about the last 3 months. Well, sorry, no. We talk about annual growth. That's the figure. And the annual growth for the United States is 2.6%. For us, it's 1.1%. We haven't got the highest growth in the G7. I mean, that's just simply untrue. Manipulation of statistics to try and make that case. But whatever you look at, the UK economy is performing very poorly and certainly worse than it was performing under the Conservatives. He stabilised nothing, and that's for stabilising the country. I mean, God help us. I mean, he's banned prayer outside abortion centres. We've had riots in the streets particularly over the killing of Henry Novak, etc. And what about the Southport murders, which were handled all very badly. I mean, the idea that the country is now stabilised, whereas under the Tories it was in conflict, is just completely untrue.
Yeah, and look what happens to the nation when he resigns. We win the most important football match in centuries. There you go. Perhaps the two things are not, the same.
I don't think we can. I don't think Starmer had much influence on the football, but it's interesting, like you say. I mean, Trump has apparently had influence over the US team, but I'm afraid that the player sent off in the Mexico match, Kwanzaa, deserves to be sent off. There's no way that FIFA are going to overturn that decision.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about that, and one of them I know you won't like is that the VAR won again on that one. Apparently, there's a general agreement that studs down the back of the leg, but it wasn't intentional. He was completely off balance when it happened, and in the real world of things happening at normal speed, the referee could well have said, yeah, it was accidental. There's a yellow card. But when you got it in slow-mo, played back 3 or 4 times, as often happens, Sid, it looks twice as bad as it really is. The curse of VAR.
No, well, we disagree on that because, in my view, if you go in on a tackle with your studs up, which you did, you are endangering the opposition player, and he basically got the opposition player's legs with his studs. I mean, and I'm sorry, it was a very dangerous tackle. What I disagree with was the VR decision over the Mexico penalty, where they penalised Harry Kane, who was clearly going for the ball. And I thought he got the ball, but I mean, they're saying, oh no, he got the opposition player's foot. But quite honestly, I mean, obviously, both players were going for the ball. I mean, Kane wasn't, trying to get the man or something, which is what a foul is about. When you see players that they're not even looking at the ball, they're just looking at the man and bringing down the man. That's when it's a foul, not when you're both going for the ball and you accidentally clip the opposition player slightly and going for the ball. I mean, that's not a foul. And what is wrong there is that VAR is only supposed to overturn a decision if it's a clear and obvious error. The referee didn't even see anything, so VAR prompted him to stop the game to have a look at and it wasn't a clear and obvious error. It was a highly debatable penalty.
Come back, Vinnie Jones, all is forgiven. I wonder how long he would have stayed on a football field with VAR, Sid.
Well, you would have seen him grabbing the crotch of Gascoigne. I mean, absolutely, VAR would have, yeah, they'd definitely sent him off for that. But yeah, I mean, he did a lot of things that would have were, when no one was looking, so he thought. Yeah, under VAR, he'd have certainly been punished, no question.
Which moves us to Andy Burnham, because he was the other speech maker this last few days. And if that wasn't a blob civil servant speech, I don't know what is. He said absolutely nothing. He wouldn't be interviewed by the journalists. This is something to be feared and look forward to when he gets the big job.
Well, it's concerning because apparently Burnham doesn't know what he's going to do because the fact that he's not willing to be interviewed by journalists basically means he hasn't got answers. And the only things that he's saying concretely, when you move away all the fluff, like you say, there's been masses of fluff, but when you set that aside and look at the concrete proposals, I mean, one is to move power to the north. So apparently he's going to set up a number 10 of the north rather than residing all the time in London. Now that's going to achieve nothing as far as I'm concerned. It's just bureaucracy. And the other thing which he's talked about is nationalisation. So he's talked about nationalising water and nationalising the railways, etc. Now I think all that will be a disaster as well because it's going to, I remember British Rail, and British Rail was just a terrible disaster, as we said before. And the problem with nationalising the water is, okay, you might have some problems, but the problems were far worse when water was under state ownership because water never got any investment at all. It just wasn't, it was just in the line behind uh, behind the health service and education, all these other things, and just didn't get any investment. So I can't see that nationalisation of water will achieve anything at all. Frankly, I believe those things are taking the country backwards. So, but we've got to look and see what Andy Burnham is proposing. But it is concerning the fact that he hasn't got very good ideas. Well, and the ideas he is putting forward are frankly more harmful than beneficial to the economy.
Yeah, I've got a headline for you. And it's since 1968, there have been 17 attempts to reform the civil service. Not one has succeeded. And there are a number of reasons. I'll read a commentator's answer to this. Whitehall must be more agile, more mission focused, more digital, more accountable, more joined up, more innovative, more outward looking. All right, that's very generalized statements, I know. But in essence, Whitehall have been seen to be a real problem to government way back to the 1960s. And the thing is, it's like wading through treacle, Sid. Nothing happens.
Yes, because you're up against some strong inertia. Now, the only way to handle this is to do one of two things. Well, to do two things, do both of them. Sorry. The first is to close government departments that you don't want and literally make all the staff redundant. So that particularly applies, for instance, to all the environment quangos we've got. So we need to just literally close them all down and make all the staff redundant that are employed by those quangos. Unless, of course, the quangos can get funding from elsewhere, but the government will stop funding them. And as far as government departments is concerned, there's some departments that you literally say, right, this environment department that we've got, Department of Environment, we're just going to close that down because we don't want a Department of Environment anymore. We'll put everything that we do need that may be beneficial, we'll put it under the business secretary under a different department, but that department will just close down completely. Now, that's what you need to do because legally, if you're closing down a department, you can make everyone redundant. That's perfectly legal. What you can't do is just fire people for no reason. But the other thing we need to do is to look at natural wastage. So basically, every position that becomes vacant, you will examine as to whether we require that position to be filled again, or whether we can incorporate it in other roles and produce something more, more effective. So that's another way in which you can reduce staff, because obviously you don't have to fill vacant posts. So legally, whereas you can't just sack people for no reason. So those are the things that you've got to look at. I mean, Trump has been very good at just sacking people in the United States, but that's been basically people who are leaders, who are chief executives, that are basically saying, you're not running your department correctly. You're not running your department as I want it to be run. So I'm sorry, I'm removing you from post. Well, those people will probably go take Trump to court, but hopefully they won't win, because Trump has every right to say, I'm sorry, you're not doing what I want you to do, or running your department as I want it to be run. But it is a difficult process. And the only way to deal with it is to have a very strong leader who knows exactly what they want and gets to grips with it. So if you have a weak prime minister who doesn't really know what they're doing, which apparently is what Andy Burnham's going to be, then you've got no chance. You've got no chance. All Andy Burnham's going to do is, by and large, whatever the civil service tell him.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. But there's one thing to throw in the pot as well, and that's the British disease of short-termism. We are only concerned with the day. We don't look 10, 15, 20 years ahead, which we should do rather, for things like defence and many other things, long-term capital investment and spending. We're interested in the next election when the first election is just over. And we've got to get away from this, Sid, and I don't know how it can be done, because in the departments that you've been talking about, in the civil servants, what happens, of course, is that there are various ministries appointed for seats in the cabinet, but there's churn on an industrial scale. Their average life is less than 2 years in recent times. And in the past, when there's been some diktat from above, the Prime Minister and the Minister for each department in the civil servants have got together to make sure things are pushed through. That no longer happens when you're in a job for 5 minutes. Somebody else has got to learn the position. By the time they've learned it, it's move on time. That's a big reason nothing happens at civil service level.
Well, I agree with you. And yeah, you need a very strong prime minister supported by strong ministers, which we had with Margaret Thatcher and her ministers, to actually bring reform and do things. I mean, a classic example, which I've talked about before, was the introduction of GP fund holding, which is like total reform of the whole health system and making it far better, as well as bringing a whole lot of privatisation into the health service. Private contractors to provide meals, private contractors to clean the linen, private contractors to clean wards, and so on and so forth, which was very efficient and very effective and saved the NHS enormous amounts of money. And that's something that Margaret Thatcher did, and other governments, and reformed the health service and made it more efficient. Now, since then, everything's gone backwards. They got rid of GP fund holding. Then Corbyn was saying, get rid of private contractors, all private contractors from the NHS. Well, that hasn't happened, thank goodness. But, there's enormous amounts of money wasted there. And efficiency should be the watchword of everyone in government, frankly. How can we do this more efficiently? How can we do anything more efficiently? And it is in some departments, but it's not across the board.
Andy Burnham wants to move everything to Manchester. He wants to set up devolution everywhere. Let's have more mayors, more devolution. Well, that would mean more third-rate politicians. Sorry, Scotland and Wales, you proved this completely. It costs a fortune to have you devolved in real terms, and we've mentioned this in the past, up to 6 times more expensive than having an MP in Westminster per individual. It's ridiculous. And he wants to get and do this. It's a disaster before it happens.
Yes, I agree, you see, but it's the actually complete opposite of what we're saying. Because instead of reducing the civil service, which is what we're saying we need to do, and to cut it back, you're actually putting in new layers of bureaucracy, a whole new set of civil servants in the regions, and increasing the payroll of government. And frankly, it's ridiculous, totally unaffordable, and totally unnecessary.
Another headline for you. Is Andy Burnham Tony Blair in a t-shirt?
No, because you see, Tony Blair, when he came to power in 1997, basically said he was going to follow conservative economic policy for the first 2 years, and was basically going to work within the budgets of the Conservative government. So wasn't going to spend any more money than the Conservatives would have spent if they'd been re-elected. And that was a very bold policy, and a policy that was actually carried out by him and Gordon Brown, and gave people a lot of confidence, as well as giving a lot of stability into the economy. What he then did was manage the media, of course, so every day's headline was managed. And after the 2 years, they did start to increase spending. He also opened the borders. I mean, the open borders was a bad decision in my view. But in terms of the economy, Tony Blair did pretty well during his time in office, for the reasons that I've given. Andy Burnham is no way he's going to do anything like Tony Blair did on the economy. I think he's going to be a disaster on the economy from what we've heard so far.
Okay, Vikram Digwa and his mother have cost the taxpayer £155,000 already in court costs. Now he's appealing his sentence, rubbing salt into the wound there. And the world are laughing at us again, Sid.
Yes, I don't understand this, because my understanding was that he pleaded guilty. And if you plead guilty, how do you appeal a sentence when you pleaded guilty? I mean, obviously you can say the sentence was too long, but you can't really appeal the verdict. Obviously, if you've pleaded not guilty and you've had a trial and things are brought into the trial that shouldn't have been brought in, or things that should have been brought in weren't mentioned in court, then you've got an appeal on the basis that you didn't have a fair trial. But when you pleaded guilty, as far as I can see, I think appealing it seems to me to be nonsense.
Does indeed, but as usual, there's only one gainer out of this lot, and that's the legal profession. Wow. Before we raise the blood pressure, let's go to Buck House, Buckingham Palace. I see this morning that Harry would have no objection for going in there. The King would, of course. This is political banter that you can go back over to America and have another television program. Oh, I agreed to go into Buck House, but the King won't. Who knows? I'll tell you something significant that's come out also in the last 24 hours regarding the King. It's been admitted on 2 occasions he spoke to the Prime Minister and said, basically, this is supposed to be soft power. Think again about Mandelson before you jump in that direction. That is terrible, Sid.
So you're saying the King said that to Starmer before he appointed Mandelson?
Yes.
Really, it's interesting. Very interesting.
No, bombshell.
Yeah. So, so you see, the thing is, Starmer told the House of Commons that he went through a very rigorous process with Mandelson and didn't find any problems. Where actually we now know the truth is that he was advised not to appoint him before he went through the proper security vetting, which advice he ignored. And now we're told that he was also advised by the king not to appoint him. So the idea that he went through a very rigorous process, it was just a blatant lie. And that should have been referred to the Common Standard Committee. And of course, every party in Parliament wanted it to be referred to the Standards Committee, except the Labour Party, who were whipped to basically told you will lose your position as a Labour MP if you don't vote against this. So on that basis, it wasn't referred to the Common Standards Committee. But basically, that decision was a terrible decision. Not only the decision itself, but the way it was taken.
Yeah, a lot goes on behind the scenes. I'm wondering why more and more as days passed, when the president of Nigeria came over, and there has been more murders, we know, against Christians in that country than anywhere else in the world by a country mile. If he had real power, or does he have more power than we think, the king should have highlighted that more than anything. And as far as we know, Sid, nothing's been done.
Absolutely. Other than the fact that I believe Trump has sent over a certain number of American soldiers over to northern Nigeria, who apparently are working with the Nigerian army and have had some success. But obviously, it's still going on. It's going on primarily with the Fulani tribesmen. But what was really annoying was that when Tokunbo, who's the president of Nigeria, came over here with his wife on a state visit, he was challenged about the Christians being killed in Nigeria and basically said it's not happening, it's all lies. There's nobody being killed. And he said the same in America. And we know that he was lying. And when leaders just blatantly lie like that about something so important as people being murdered in your country, then it's very serious, frankly, very serious. And Tokunbo would not be president of Nigeria if they'd had a free and fair election, because there's even the BBC did some tallying. I see the way the system works is ridiculous, but they tally the votes in the regions, and then when they've tallied the votes in the regions, they then give the vote manually to somebody who then takes the tally to Lagos, who then where the actual result is announced. But in between the tally in the regions and the result being announced in Lagos, then there's numerous changes take place mysteriously. That's the system in Nigeria. So the BBC was able to prove that the actual tally in the region was different from the result that was announced in Lagos. And it happened time and time again. A Christian, Peter Wood, would have been elected if it had been a free and fair election in Nigeria.
Yeah. Well, they can't get everything wrong, the BBC, but they certainly got another thing wrong. And it's the same old, same old. Now, I don't watch BBC News. I got better things to do. But I was trapped into watching it last evening. And my goodness me, it's not changed. There was 5 minutes of appreciation for the Iran regime about the funeral of Khomeini. And you'd have thought, what's going on here? It was almost a coronation, if you can say such extended language. It was awful. What is coming out? Do people actually believe anything that comes out of Panorama and the BBC these days?
Well, it's just ridiculous. But the BBC line is that Khomeini was actually a very moderate ruler who who was very fair and very reasonable. And Trump's war, killing Khamenei and killing all the leaders, has just opened the door for new, far more radical leaders who are far more dangerous. That's the BBC line. So basically, under Khamenei we not only had numerous people hung for being dissidents, we had 40,000 demonstrators murdered in the streets. So that's the extent to which what the BBC is saying is just a complete lie. And they can't actually point to any policy that these new radical leaders have brought in that is worse than a policy that Khomeini had. Khomeini was very clear: death to Israel, death to America. We need a nuclear bomb. We've got to wipe out Israel. They know exactly what they were after. So the idea that they were somehow moderate is just totally untrue. And what you're saying about praising him in his funeral is just completely false, completely false.
Yeah, finally, we must go. You think it's bad in UK? Well, it's worse in Spain. We've got a prime minister. Could he be worse than Starmer? Well, Pedro Sanchez, extreme left, and got into bed with even more extreme leftists to keep his position. He's corrupt and is about to feel the weight of the law against him, unless he can be as dodgy as he has been. His wife, they've got hold of. Perhaps that's the escape route. She's been siphoning off funds for years, pretending she runs a charity and getting stuff through the university system. We've got a Mandelson on steroids, a gentleman that's the spin doctor. His right-hand man has just got 25 years for corruption. My goodness me, things are in a bad way. People are on the streets here. Not only about immigration, but especially about immigration, but also about corruption. It's going on everywhere, Sid.
Yes, and hopefully he'll be voted out very soon if he doesn't somehow fiddle the election system, which is happening increasingly all over the world these days, which is very, very sad. But yeah, certainly he needs to be removed from office. He's been an absolutely terrible leader. But you know, you can fool the people some of the time, but you can't fool the people all the time.
Long history in Spain, long history in Iran, long history in Britain. Do we learn from history? Not often. Sid, thank you so much. We've not ended on football. Well, we started on it. There you go. There's a difference. We'll see you very shortly.
Okay, cheers.